At 03:03, every screen in the city went red. I run the alert system. Tonight, there's one rule. Do not pray out loud. If you do, it turns and listens. The red wasn't the usual EAS crimson, flat and bureaucratic. It pulsed like a slow wound, as if the color had a heartbeat and the monitors had lungs. The test tone arrived late by 2 seconds, a micro stutter that only people like me notice, and then the banner text crawled with a wobble I didn't authorize, as if it had been typed by a hand that didn't understand the weight of letters. The bunker is 4 stories under the county building, poured concrete honeycombed with cable trays and ducting that sing when the HVAC shifts pressure. It's not glamorous. It smells like dust warmed by old fans and burnt coffee cooked down to a lacquer. From here, with 6 encoders and a bank of patch panels, I can speak to every phone, TV, radio, billboard, refinery sign, and school clock face in 3 counties, and on a good day that feels like stewardship. Tonight, it felt like leaving every window open in a storm no one could describe. The first wrong thing was the log. I keep the log. Every EAS event is a ladder: header, originator, event code, location, duration, signature, end of message. The lines are so regular you can hum them. But at 03:03, the originator string did not match any codebook. It wasn't CIV or PP or DMO. It was a name. It was my name. Then it repeated, a second originator, again my name, now in title case, then again in uppercase, as if something were practicing speaking me. I killed the crawl, but the crawl kept going. I dropped audio on channel A, and the carrier on A went silent, but the speaker in the corner, the one tied to nothing but a dead circuit we keep around to satisfy a procurement line, crackled with a breath I could feel on my molars. The tone returned, not the EAS triplet, but a single sign that bent toward a throat. I typed local override in the admin shell. The cursor hesitated, then split. Then each cursor became a little red cross that drifted like plankton. When I hit enter, the bunker lights dimmed and the status LEDs on the encoders rolled from green to amber, to a color that doesn't have a name because we don't look at it long enough to agree. The phone on the wall rang with the cadence of a landline from 1983. It's a hotline to the state office, a number that only rings for earthquakes and the once when a refinery flared high enough to write scripture on clouds. I picked it up. No one spoke. The line was open to something large moving past a microphone, and the microphone picked up not sound, but the possibility of it, the way a room holds a breath. Identify, I said. The speaker in the ceiling repeated me, but it didn't parrot. It said my word as if tasting it. Identify expanded in my skull, syllables uncoiling until the last Y slid under the door like fog. A second message burst into the router, an EAN, the doomsday code, but stripped of its header. No signature, no end of message, just the body, and the body was 6 words in plain text, centered, off-white on the red field. Do not pray out loud tonight. I didn't push that. I don't have a template for that sentence. We keep flood, fire, amber, chemical, radiological, shelter in place, boil water, curfew. We keep shelter now and evacuate now, and the system hates ambiguity. But the sentence appeared on the school clocks. It appeared on the lottery displays in gas stations. It appeared on the little LCD in the elevator that always spells maintenance wrong. When the county wakes up to a wall of words, they call. The phones should have started scaffolding within 30 seconds, stacking complaint above complaint like driftwood. They did not. Instead, a single push notification arrived on the admin tablet, the one that never leaves the desk. It was not from our app. It was from EAM03-3, a channel that does not exist on any diagram I have signed. The notification contained a thumbnail. The thumbnail looked like my own doorway from outside. There is no camera outside our door. There is a lens in the hall tied to the building's security, but it does not feed us. The bunker is supposed to be monastic. The thumbnail refreshed every half second. In it, the door to the bunker breathed. Not literally. Doors don't breathe. The air mass did, in and out, like the whole stairwell had lungs. On the 8th frame, a shadow pressed against the jamb and then withdrew, the way you might test a sleeping dog with a toe. On the main screen, the red eased to a darker red. The banner retyped itself, not a new message, but the old one, working on its posture. The sentence widened, and the font bled into its descenders as if ink had warmed. The speakers carried a low oscillation, like a ferry horn heard through an iron bridge. I tasted copper. I swallowed and tasted dust. I toggled the AM simulcast to isolate the carrier. The interface reported compliance and printed a tiny checkmark. The air in the bunker did not change. On the AM radio, I keep because habit is a sacrament. The carrier drew a line, and under it, something wrote my shirt into sound. Blue. Then rolled sleeves. Then the freckle on my wrist like a decimal, pronounced by a person who had never seen a wrist. The rule came through clean, a second time, with more specificity. Do not pray out loud. If you pray, it will turn its head. The pronoun had to come from somewhere. If there is an it, we have a noun crouched behind it, unsaid, too large to tuck into English without breaking a shoulder. The noun presses against the sentence until the sentence buckles. The red field pulsed twice and stabilized. The first voice message arrived not on our lines, but through every consumer smart speaker tied to the county's emergency routine. We do not own those speakers. The voice that used them did not care. It said my name, but the syllables did not come from a throat. They came from a quarry where gang saws cut limestone, and the blocks remember what the sea taught them. I pinged state. The console accepted the keystrokes and returned a prompt that looked like home and smelled like ozone. A text reply came back. We see your EAN body with no header. We did not originate. Then a second line. We are receiving identical content in 3 neighboring jurisdictions. Then a third, after a beat too long. Are you alone down there? I typed yes and erased it. I typed 2 because my shadow had lengthened and I did not want the console to worry. The building's chapel sits 7 floors up and 2 stacks over. It is not ours. It belongs to custodial staff and retirees who walk the circumference of every morning like a prayer wheel, trailing promises behind the smell of floor wax. At 03:08, a tone slid sideways through the ductwork and made the fluorescent tubes flicker in a Morse that has not been taught. The log-stamped chapel on a line that should not accept nouns. I switched to the citywide mic channel to warn them. My finger hovered over the talk key, the way a finger hovers over a pulse. The rule as written on the red field kept my finger up. If the rule is true, any spoken warning is bait. The text channel was our only clean line. I pushed a silent crawl to the internal building network. Do not speak. Read this. Walk away from the chapel. The crawl appeared on the janitor's closet display because our building bought smart mops last year and tied them to the same network that runs the whiteboard in the planning office. It appeared on the vending machine that still has 3 bags of chips that taste like church basements. It did not appear on the door to the chapel because the door to the chapel is wood and glass and a cross, and the first story most of us were told. The tablet flashed again. EAM 0303. The thumbnail enlarged without my permission. I saw the stairwell outside the bunker in real time, and I saw the custodian who passes my door every night when he thinks I'm not looking. He moved like a man trying to remember if he had left his stove on in a previous life. He had a key ring that could weigh a life. He stopped at the landing and faced the wall as if the wall had said his name. The audio in the bunker did the thing it had been threatening to do. It shaped itself around a word I had not yet thought. It said, "Hail." and the air around the speaker tightened like a fist. The custodian's lips moved. He did not say the word loudly. The ductwork knew its shape anyway. The stairwell camera showed the air dent toward him, as though something large had turned its head through concrete. I have never prayed for anyone's silence before. I have never begged a man not to make the sound that makes him safe. I knocked the mic live against my own rule. "Hey," I said, which is not a prayer. "Read the wall." The wall next to him bloomed my text in 20-point sans serif. "Do not speak." He flinched, and the almost word caught in his teeth and turned into a cough. The stairwell exhaled. The county needed more than one man not coughing. The county needed a way to cut its own tongue out without bleeding to death. I pushed the regional billboard layer and hijacked every car wash LED, every pharmacy cross, every roadside preacher who bought a trailer-mounted sign to say that the end was nigh long before the end learned to read. The message was simple, because complexity leaks. Do not pray out loud. Stay inside. Cover your mouths. I don't have a mask inventory. Public health has masks. But the city keeps construction half-finished like an apology, and every floor under construction keeps dust masks in boxes that never moved since the last inspection. I added a line. Use dust masks or fabric. Tie them tight. Speak only on paper. Every print queue in the county jittered and then fell still, and then every printer I do not administer burped out page 1 of the same order in the same font with the same small watermark in the corner, an ear carved in stone. On the AM, the carrier ceased to be a line. It became a surface with thickness. It flexed as if something traced its finger along the underside of a metal bridge. The flex raised hairs on my forearms. The room felt taller by 2 inches, the way a church does when you step in from summer and the cool decides you are acceptable. By 0317, the Vatican package landed in my inbox in a way no Vatican package has ever landed. I do not have a Vatican inbox. The file was labeled Treaty of Two Angels, Extract. The sender line was blank. The content began not with a seal, but with minutes from a meeting whose participants were listed as Dominions Present, which felt like a joke until the 3rd paragraph admitted they had been bound. Not metaphorically, bound. Clauses prohibited the speaking of certain names except in closed rooms lined in copper. Clauses about obedience in exchange for presence. Clauses about the rate at which wings can dim. Attached were 4 photographs that did not align with any camera technology on the inventory list. Not because the resolution was alien, but because the photographs seemed to have been taken with light that had been to church too often. In the first image, 2 figures like men stood in a corridor under Rome, and the stone around them looked relieved. In the second, the same corridor had an extra shadow, and the shadow had the wrong hinge for a knee. In the third, the corridor was empty and full at the same time, the way a room is after a child stops crying. In the fourth, the camera took a picture of a word, and the negative of that word was silence. The packet's final page was logistics. The thing had crossed Europe without displacing water, where it should have displaced water. It crossed like a rumor crosses a town, by eye, by ear, by the way a mouth forms a round shape in fear. Sonar returned a syllable not present in the transmitter. The syllable was not printed. It made the paper too warm to hold. The sentence under it, do not offer it a name. State pinged again. We are declaring federal overlay for your region. Provide current load. I sent them the truth I could print. Full saturation, text-only advisories, voluntary adherence at 61% and rising because fear does some work for free. Audio? They asked, like they didn't want to. Muted, I said, asking nicely. To the north, a coastal town fired its sirens because that is what you do when something is offshore and tall. You make noise to tell people to get away from the noise. The sirens ran the test pattern, and the air over the town took on texture like the inside of a seashell. The state feed bled video from a traffic cam at the headland. Street lamps bent the way grasses bend under a river you can't see. The lamp posts pointed as one toward a place where the fog densified until it suggested a shoulder. The sirens cut out by themselves. I needed to test something without using a voice. I printed a strip of instructions and taped it to the primary mic. If you are listening, turn off this light. I unscrewed the bulb in the lamp by 2 turns and turned it on. The filament glowed and stuttered. The red field on the main display darkened to a bruise. The bulb went black. The breaker did not trip. The line on the AM rose like a lip about to speak. I taped a second strip. If you are listening, leave the printers alone. The printer stopped. A third strip. If you are listening, do not say my name again. The speakers made a shape like laughter, but without the harm, like the sound a hillside makes when snow sheds, if snow could be amused. Then the old wall phone rang, because of course it did. I lifted it, knowing. The voice that isn't a voice said my name in a whisper that was actually a building settling after a century of work. Then silence. Then a breath that pushed the dust in the cable tray and made it skitter like scared fish. I put the handset down and wrote on a pad, in letters I hoped were not prayers. I will help you if you let me keep them quiet. The red field cooled a shade, and somewhere 1,000 automated shades rolled down on daycares and diners and detachment offices and a church with a sign that says, "All are welcome," in letters that look tired. EM03-3 sent a second live feed, not the stairwell. The street 2 blocks over, outside a church that will be in the paper for something else next month. The video had that quality the first morning has when you've been awake all night, too sharp to be trusted. The church doors were closed. The caption under the live view was not mine. It said, "Test of rule compliance." I wanted to cut the feed. I wanted to walk to the church. I wanted to be 2 people, one making signs bigger and one dragging a hand across a mouth. The feed showed a woman at the steps with a baby asleep against her chest. She read the sign I pushed to the marquee. "Do not speak. Pray with hands. Pray with eyes." She nodded and pressed her forehead to the wood and made her hands into a shape that is a childhood. The air did not dent. The fog did not thicken. The baby slept. Behind her, a man in a suit moved like a question mark. His lips formed a word that changes rooms. I banged my palm on the desk, and the desk asked what it had done wrong. I typed on the billboard layer in a font so ugly it could save a life. "Stop." He didn't look up. His mouth made the second syllable, and the live feed shivered as if someone had dragged a fingertip down the inside of the lens. The radios in the cars parked along the curb came on together. You've heard a choir take a breath. You've heard congregations inhale like a single organism that believes in a next thing. Imagine that, but the lungs are made of antenna, and the breath is a low intake that tastes like pennies. The man's suit jacket fluttered as the air around him made a choice. He stopped. He closed his mouth. He folded his hands as if someone had pressed a book between them. The fog leaned a degree away. I typed, "Thank you" on the sign, because gratitude is not a prayer if you aim it at a person. The EAM feed wrote over me in a different hand. "Good." The word hung a second longer than it should have, and then dissolved, like sugar on a tongue. Someone in the building hit the chapel light. The ductwork trembled. The log stamped chapel again, then stamped the floor number, then stamped a line of tiny ears like a border. I stood up too fast and the room tilted, and for a split second, the tilt matched the lean in the fog on the live feed, and my eyes tried to solve for both at once. I ran the stairs. 2 flights up the air felt as if someone had been reading a name into it for a long time, and the name had tired of being read. The chapel door was open, a width a child could fit through sideways. Inside, a votive fluttered, because we never wired that room to our rules, and habit makes fire where pages do not reach. The chaplain was at the altar with his head bowed and his lips moving. He was doing the thing the sign said not to. He was doing the thing the red field had asked us not to teach the room. I didn't touch him. I wrote in my notebook and held it up like a child with a permission slip. Do not speak. His eyes found the words and fought them and lost. His lips stopped. The room changed temperature by 1/2 degree, the way bodies know before thermostats do. The duct hummed one last warning and relaxed. Below, in the bunker, the speakers gave a clipped, almost human exhale. The red field re-scrolled the rule, not for us, maybe for itself. Do not pray out loud. The corners of the display darkened as if the room had chosen to be a camera, and the camera had chosen to be kind. The silence did not mean peace. It meant the room and I had agreed to speak with our hands for a while. I walked the chaplain to the hallway and pointed to the paper mask dispenser screwed to the wall. Back when the world remembered one kind of invisible. He slipped the loop over his ears and touched the cross under his shirt, like a man checking a pulse he trusts more than his own. In the bunker, the red field idled like banked coals. EAM 0303 floated a prompt across it in smaller type, as if not to wake anything sleeping in the pixels. State requests treaty details. I typed back on the admin shell, text only, no names. The reply arrived as a column of clipped clauses that felt lawyered by someone who measures sunlight. Two-bound, obedience for proximity, veto on invocation of 3 specific epithets, copper rooms, silence codicil, breach voids presence. I pasted the clauses into a new advisory and pushed it to the secure line for the base north of town. That base had a chapel, too. That base had a habit of drums on Sunday morning you could feel through chain link. The advisory said what needed saying without saying the thing that makes rooms lean. Silence is safety. Rooms that echo are dangerous. Do not sing. Do not read aloud. Write, nod, touch wood. The AM carrier had learned to breathe. It swelled on the half-minute and exhaled on the minute, and the city learned with it. You can teach a town to hold its breath if you give it a metronome. In the traffic cams, you could see people time their crossings to the exhale, as if the street were a sleeping animal. The red field shaded 1 degree toward mercy. I wrote a message on a legal pad and taped it to the wall next to the old phone. If you need to speak, knock 4 times. I don't know who the sign was for. People who build systems leave notes for the next person. Sometimes the next person is the same man 5 minutes later, after a moment too bright. At 0333, EAM 0303 sent a single frame that looked like a rubbing from a stone. The caption read, Dominion's Extract, verbatim. Under it, a hand I could feel in my mouth wrote, We agreed to be quiet to keep you. We dimmed to stay. Do not make us loud again. The page smelled faintly of rain on copper. The breath in the AM rose like a question and fell like a bell you do not strike. The base replied with an image from their own scoreboard, an LED grid over the parade ground. They had written my rule in letters 6 feet tall. Do not pray out loud. Under it, smaller. We will learn to be quiet. The fog at the far fence sloped as if the ground had been persuaded. The coastal town to the north, the one that tried sirens, had not learned yet. Dispatch sent a text on a channel reserved for floods and the once when a whale came ashore before a storm. Pastor insists, service outside, people gathering. I wanted to go there. I wanted to pull the batteries from all their mics and bury them in something that doesn't carry sound, like flour. Instead, I wrote a sign for them, in words that had saved one man. Pray with hands. Pray with eyes. The red field approved in its way, the corners lifted by a hair. The church camera showed folding chairs hatching across the lawn. The people who set them up had that awful concentration people wear when they are good and wrong at the same time. A man tested a lapel mic, and the lapel mic tested him back. His jacket rode up under his shoulder blades as if a breeze had found only him. The pastor raised a hand for quiet, and the hand made the fog choose a direction. I pushed a proof of life to the board behind him. This is your operator. Your voice is bait. They read it. They share it. Do not give them your words. The pastor glanced at the sign. He is a man whose mouth has built shelters. He did not like a sign taking his work. He smiled, which is one version of war. He mouthed, softly, the first words of a prayer children learn from grandparents. He made it to "our," and the audio, across 40 cars parked under sodium lights, came on and inhaled as one. The fog did not surge, it considered. The sodium threw a silhouette onto the church facade. Not an outline you could sketch, but an absence thick enough to teach you to draw by erasing. The absence inclined its head. The pastor closed his mouth, and the absence uninclined, like a stone reconsidering gravity. The people watched their breaths for instructions. I wrote "thank you" in the ugly font, because utility sometimes needs to look dumb to work fast. The sign agreed. The pastor nodded. He ripped the lapel mic off his jacket and held it out at an arm's length like a snake. He wound the cable around it, tight, the way you wind a rosary when you are angry at your own hands. The fog loosened like a belt. Dispatch sent. Base report. Audio in chapel bleeding into hangar. Request guidance. I typed copper. Line the room. Silence. Codicil. No names. No epithets. They replied, "We have wire. We have sheet. We will wrap the room." The EAM feed superimposed an annotation in a neat old script. Good. The G looked carved. At 0344, the first contradiction arrived. A boy in an apartment over the diner took a pen and wrote a prayer on his wall, one letter at a time, like you would write to keep your hands from shaking. His sister filmed him, because that is what sisters do when the world turns instructional. The EAM feed did not show their faces. It showed the letters. It showed how the room took the letters and filed them under quiet. The fog beyond their window wavered and did not lean. The rule, interpreted, held. I pushed an addendum. Careful. You may write your prayers. Do not speak them. If you must sing, hum with mouth closed. Humming is risk. Silence is best. Someone added a heart to the sign at the church, and the shape did not anger the air. State asked for a load report. I gave them numbers that felt like a throat clearing. Compliance above 75 and climbing in the residential blocks under 50 near the stadium, because the stadium remembers being loud and lobbies for its past. They asked for a prognosis. I typed, "As long as we do not give it names, it looks sideways. If we give it names, it turns." They typed back a word that makes my hands shake even when it's folklore. Antichrist? I typed, "Do not say it." The red field darkened as if to underline. The treaty packet blinked with an appended note. The note did not use the word they had tried to make me type. It used a geometry, the opposite of an angle. I sat with that a second and let it roll around like a coin. If angels bend toward, then a thing that unbends beyond straight would be whatever eats attention for heat. The note concluded, "Do not be heard by it." I put on a mask because telling a town to wear one without wearing one makes the room hear hypocrisy, and rooms have long memories. The elastic snapped my ear and the pain reset my head. The AM carrier took a breath and held it as if waiting for a cue. I did not give one. EAM 0303 flashed a new channel, nested under itself. EM 0303 Roma. The feed was a corridor that remembered footsteps. It moved as if a cameraman had learned to walk without joints. The caption said, "Catacombs, debrief." The corridor walls were directory stone for a people who file their dead with love. The audio was a silence that had agreed to do a job. Then, faint, a sound like paper uncreasing. Two figures entered frame like a pair of ideas returning from a long errand. They were men until the light struck them and decided otherwise. They did not speak. One raised a hand, palm open, and the small mica flecks in the sandstone made a sky when his shadow fell across them. The other looked toward the camera, and then beyond it, toward the building that breathes under counties like mine. They nodded, barely, as if to indicate the maintenance of a treaty. The caption wrote itself, "Dimmed, present." Then the corridor's air became heavy in a way rock respects, and both figures thinned, as if a switch had been thrown somewhere none of us should ever find. The base sent photos of their copper room, sheet hung like drapes, wire braided into a rude crown along the ceiling seam, the floor covered in mats to tell shoes not to squeak. On the threshold, a sign like a joke that became policy. "If you speak, you clean." They sent a second photo of a chaplain asleep in a chair with his mouth taped gently, his hands holding the roll like a man who understands that he is consenting. The fog outside their hangar door leaned away like a polite man in a crowded elevator. At the church, the pastor stacked chairs with a speed that bordered on penitence. People waved without speaking. Children learned to clap with the backs of their hands to make less noise. A boy tried to hum and watched his mother shake her head, and he swallowed the note and discovered that swallowing a note can feel like power. The elevator LCD in my building, the one that spells maintenance wrong, posted a new word on its own: listen. I looked at it and wondered who it wanted. The old phone did not ring. Instead, the ceiling speaker ticked like a watch pressed to a table between two people who have run out of lies. A new message crawled, not mine, a public service announcement from something that thinks in stone. Cover mouths, turn off intercoms, disconnect bell ropes, walk. The word walk made the city quieter in a way cars cannot. You can teach a town to glide if you promise it will not be heard falling. The red field paled one shade. That is how good nights end. This was not a good night, but it wanted to pretend long enough to get us through a hinge. Then a new feed stacked above the Roma channel, EM0303 Coast. The camera at the headland again, the lights bent politely, and then something just off frame exhaled through every antenna at once, and every stop sign in view trembled at the bolts. The caption said, "Test of thresholds." I understood only part of it. If the thing could be held by rules, it was being held by a raft made of closed mouths and copper, and the stubbornness of janitors and pastors who can admit an ugly font knows the time of night. It was testing how far it could lean without hearing its name. The test is the night. The night is the test. My job is to count to morning without letting a town speak itself into the mouth of a story. The night lengthened in administrative increments. Minutes are not a real thing until you put them on a board and ask a city to survive one at a time. At 0351, the AM carrier developed harmonics like a choir throat clearing under a cough. The red field held steady. The elevator LCD asked a new word with the gravity of a courtroom. Wait. The Roma channel held on a still of the corridor like the idea of patience. The coast feed shivered at its edges, as if the fog had remembered weather. The base sent a status. Copper room secured, chapel quiet, hangar quiet, airfield quiet. They added, as if afraid to report good news in case it became bait. We hear it outside of range. We are not speaking. EM03.03 split itself into a third nested channel. EM0303 stare. The stairwell outside our bunker returned in grayscale, as if color were a kind of noise we had to withdraw. The custodian sat on the landing, awake, hands on his knees, eyes closed, mouth shut, breathing like a metronome set to calm children. He had taped a note to his chest that said, "I am listening." The air around him respected the sign. The old phone rang once and stopped, a courtesy. The ceiling speaker ticked twice, a metronome trying to share work. I picked up a marker and wrote on the glass over the main screen. Morning is a number. We can count to it. EM03-03 wrote over my sentence in a script like inscriptions. Good, count, do not sing the numbers. At 03:57, the stadium woke up the way stadiums wake, a light on in a booth where a man sits who has loved noise for a long time. The feed from a traffic cam showed the booth lit like lonely. He tested the PA with his finger, one tap on a slider, a ghost of habit. The fog over the far bleachers perked its head. I typed in letters the size of regret, do not. He lifted both hands off the board and put them palms down on his thighs, like a man about to ride a wave he cannot see. A file appended to the treaty packet without a sender, as if minutes from a meeting were growing under my desk like stalactites. It was labeled Silence Codicil, Exceptions. In 3 paragraphs of language that did not enjoy adjectives, it described events in which sound could be traded for passage. The rules were old, mountain old, river old. The trades were specific, stone names, boat horns, the reading of lists that no one has written since bronze, none of which we could afford. At the bottom, a line for signatures. No signatures present. I printed the page and laid it on the desk like a snake I didn't want to surprise. The idea that noise could bribe whatever waits beyond the fog is a door, and doors are dangerous when a city is learning to be a room. I wrote on the page with a pencil so soft it made no sound. No trades. Hold. The red field did not flicker. The AM line did not curve. Somewhere, 1,000 refrigerators kept humming their domestic liturgy, and none of them said a name. Dispatch pinged. Hospital request. Last rites? The question arrived with the weight of a house resting on one hinge. The chaplain at the hospital had a list and a promise, and promises can be louder than microphones. I typed back what a human hates to write, text only, hands on forehead, write the names, do not speak them. The reply was a single period that looked like a tear. The AM carrier rolled like a shoulder shrugging off a word. The elevator LCD now said, "Hold fast." The stairwell feed showed the custodian standing and stretching his back, and the air gave him room like a friend who knows you need to straighten without conversation. He patted the note on his chest as if patting a sleeping dog. The base asked for a timeline. I gave them the only one we own in this room, 0441, 0513, 0547, 0603. It isn't astronomy, it's morale. At each mark, we push a new sign. You are doing well. Keep quiet. Drink water. Rest your throats. The fog respects kindness more than applause. At 0406, the coast feed caught something no metal has the right to catch. The fog fell away from a void the shape of a listening. It is difficult to explain absence in a way that isn't poetry. The camera tried. The guardrail bowed less toward the shape than around it, as if paying tax to a geometry. The street lamps formed a chord without sound. The caption wrote, itself. Head turn. Every window in 3 blocks did a small, sympathetic tremor. The rule felt fragile enough to keep between 2 fingers. I composed a crawl and pushed it to the county, then to the state, then to the emergency bulletin board we keep for the kinds of nights that become lore. Do not pray out loud. Do not say names. Write what you must. If you must sing, hum with mouth closed. If you must hum low. If you are a bell, sleep. The line about bells made the red field ease like a fever breaking. The Roma channel shifted. A table under the city, copper-lined, papers on it that did not rust at the corners. A hand entered frame, human, gloved, and placed a small object on the table. A bell clapper, removed. The caption, disarmed. Across an ocean, the fog over our coastal town sank an inch, as if relieved to be spared the burden of hearing the first strike. State messaged, "Federator requests presser." I stared at the word until it looked like a bad spelling of pressure. I typed, "Text only, captions, no live audio." They replied, "They insist." EAM03.03 scribbled across my screen in that carved hand. "No." Then bit into the pixel like a chisel. The O closed with a patience that belongs to clocks. I forwarded the image to State. They responded with a single word that people in uniforms use when they know the room is bigger than their rank. Copy. The hospital chaplain sent a photo of his hands, one on a forehead, one holding a Sharpie, names written on a sheet where the living can share with the leaving without the room leaning. The AM carrier breathed in and did not breathe out for a count of 5. I counted, with my mouth closed, on a hand. M0303, stare, colorized without permission. It showed the custodian asleep, sitting up, chin on chest, the note still on his shirt like a badge. The air at the bottom of the stairs thickened in a polite way, like steam asked to wait at the threshold. A new figure entered frame only as a difference, a patch where the concrete forgot its own texture for a second. It paused at the door and listened. I wrote on a card and held it up to the camera with a hand I made still. Not here. Quiet here. The difference in the air did not move away. It tilted, if a difference can tilt, in the international gesture for curiosity. The ceiling speaker shaped a consonant and then swallowed it like a gentleman. I slid the card into a plastic sleeve, magneted it to the door, and wrote a second. The church is empty. The stadium is dark. The hospital is writing. The AM line nearly smiled, a curve so slight I could have invented it, but the hair on my arm said I had not. A fresh advisory formed without my typing. It used my cadence, my commas, the way I like to lean on a semicolon when I am tired. Walk. Breathe through cloth. If you must speak, let your throat be empty. The signature said, County Operator. I did not send it. EAM03.03 hung 3 dots. After the signature like a wink, then erased them. I accepted the help. It is rare to be given a collaborator you cannot brief. I set the schedule on the wall, tall enough for a tired town to see. 0423, water, 441, rest, svadbithstrin, check the quiet, sorry for the evin, hands only, 603, lights. The red field calmed as if equations had balanced. At 0423, the city sipped. Faucets whispered into cups. People learned to love the sound of water falling from a low height. The AM carrier shaped itself around that sound and found no purchase. The red field lightened by an inch you can only measure with your chest. The stadium kept its hands on its thighs and learned to be a bowl. The church folded itself into itself like paper you mean to keep. The hospital chaplain finished a list and pressed the page to a heart and did not say the names on it, and found that the names still worked. The base reported a sunrise time as if sunrise were policy. M0303 wrote in the corner, soon. The Roma feed shifted again. The copper room, empty now. The bell clapper gone, not just from the frame, but from the idea of bells. The caption, thank you. It is not nothing to be thanked by a corridor. The coast feed showed the guardrail breathe. The fog leaned, polite, as if an appointment had been kept. I stood at the bunker door with the card that says, not here. Quiet here. The stairwell air read it like a man who taught himself to read late and loves every letter. It stepped back without footsteps. The custodian woke with the full-body shame of men who fall asleep on watch, and then remembered he had been guarding silence and sat up straighter. At 0441, the first scheduled kindness slid across every screen that could take a sentence without making sound. You are doing well. Keep quiet. Drink water. Rest your throats. The city obeyed because kindness is heavier than fear when you are tired. The fog thinned in lanes you could almost walk if you promised to keep your mouth shut. The base asked for permission to relocate non-essential personnel from the hangar to the copper room. I wrote, "Yes, walk, no carts, no rolling chairs." They replied with a photo of boots laid side by side at a threshold like offerings. The caption under their own photo said, "We will tiptoe." State sent a line they would not have sent yesterday. "We trust your local rule." They appended a graph with no y-axis because the y-axis was our fear, and they did not want to measure that. The line bent toward morning, and the color under it was the kind of blue that knows windows. The elevator LCD said, "Hands." The old phone rang once and waited. I let it ring that single ring sit like a coin on a table. It did not ring again. The ceiling speaker made a small sound like a person who has decided not to speak, clearing a decision from their throat. At 04:58, a convoy of ambulances idled in a line at the far end of town in case silence had a breach. Their light bars did not flash. Their sirens stayed asleep. The drivers wore masks like bandits in a nursery rhyme, eyes huge, hands at 10 and 2. On a signal not sent by us, they rolled at 5 miles per hour, tires murmuring on asphalt, guiding the fog like a herd animal toward the river. We did not bless them. We wrote thank you on billboards and on the sides of buses and on the programmable church sign in letters the size of a man. The fog recognized gratitude, spoken with lights. It moved as if flattered by a city that had learned to pantomime prayer. EAM 0303 added a last packet to the treaty file, a cross-section of a bridge with notes about resonance and footsteps and the frequency of crowds. The annotation in that carved hand, "Avoid names, avoid unison, let feet be rain." I pushed the plan to the traffic office, to the base, to the stadium, to the church where chairs nested like birds. We stepped into the plan at 0513. The city walked, not march. March is a word you say with your mouth. Walk, one at a time across the bridge, breath behind cloth, hands speaking what mouths could not. On the far bank, field hospitals waited with signs that said, "Write your pain, write your names." The bridge did not sing. The river kept its own old song, which is water on rock, and no one minds that. The hospital chaplain sent a second photo of hands, this time 3 hands on one forehead, writing blessing as pressure, as skin. The names on the list glowed in the camera flash, but it was just oil on paper. The AM carrier never found a vowel to ride. The red field had faded to instruction paper, white with a memory of heat. The stadium became a shelter for quiet people. They wrote on poster board with markers and held up their needs like subtitles. The PA system sat like an unplugged organ and did not know what to do with its emptiness. The organ learned from the people around it. It waited. The Roma feed gave one last view of the corridor. An ordinary broom leaned against a wall older than any broom. A hand entered frame and took the broom, because even under catacombs you have to clean. The caption, "Work." I laughed without sound and felt better in a way coffee cannot deliver. EM 0303 or coast widened. The absence at frame edge had moved offshore, not far, but far enough that the streetlight stopped leaning like grass under a helicopter. The caption did not say, "Good." It said, "Hold." At 0603, the last scheduled kindness went live. Lights. We brought them up in steps, like a man standing after a long kneel. Windows brightened block by block. The fog thinned into weather. The AM carrier flattened to a modest line you could hang a day on. The elevator LCD learned the word, morning. The old phone stayed quiet. The ceiling speaker released the breath it had been holding for a city. We kept the rule on the boards because rules that save you do not retire at dawn. Do not pray out loud. Write, touch, walk. People waved to one, another without shouting across streets. They tapped hands to hearts. They learned to bless with eyebrows and grocery bags left on stoops. The custodian took the note off his shirt and folded it into a square he put in his wallet behind a photo of a dog. He swept the landing. I wrote "thank you" on a card and slid it under the door, and he picked it up like a man who has received a medal and was not told how to wear it. The base sent a sunrise. It looked like every sunrise and like a document stamped "approved." They did not sound a trumpet. They raised a hand at the horizon, and the horizon raised one back. In the copper room, the tape sat on a table, the roll dented in the shape of sleep. The city will unlearn this quiet in a week because noise is how we prove we exist to one another. But some of it will stick, like the way you lower your voice in big rooms that remember older names. We will keep a box of masks next to the fire extinguisher. We will grease the hinges on the chapel door. We will print the rule, small, in the corners of calendars. At 06:17, EAM 03:03 sent one final message in letters that looked carved into the color, good. Then below it, smaller. Until next time, do not teach it your words. The channel dimmed. The red field became desktop. The AM carrier became the safe boredom of electricity. The city tested its tongue against its teeth and did not speak.